Two guards told a black Marine to leave his son's graduation. 6 Navy SEALs made them speechless. Families filled the stands of the Naval Parade Ground, waving flags and clutching bouquets. That's where Marcus Hale stood, black, broad-shouldered, his Marine dress blues sharp enough to slice through the humid Virginia air. He wasn't just a Marine. He was a decorated gunnery sergeant, with more years of service than some of these fresh-faced graduates had been alive. Today wasn't about him, though. Today was about his son, graduating from the Navy's elite training program. Marcus had gotten there early, ticket in hand, his posture straight, even though no one here was checking for military bearing. That was when they approached. 2 security guards in crisp polo shirts, radios clipped to their belts, their eyes already narrowing before they'd even said a word. "You here for the ceremony?" one asked. His tone didn't bother hiding the suspicion. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, calm and even. "My son's graduating today." The other guard glanced him up and down, gaze lingering on his skin before flicking to the crowd. "Gonna need you to step aside, sir. This area's for families of graduates only." Marcus blinked, confused for half a beat. "I am family." He held up his ticket between 2 fingers. "Right here." But the first guard didn't even look at it. "Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave the premises." In the grandstand, the band was warming up. The chatter of excited families swelled. And at the gate, Marcus Hale stood still, jaw tight, the proud day he'd been waiting for starting to sour, because somewhere, in the eyes of these 2 men, the uniform on his back still wasn't enough. And they had no idea who was about to step in next. Marcus didn't move. Years in the Corps had taught him patience under pressure, but also when to plant your feet and refuse to be moved. "Sir," the first guard said again, sharper this time, "I'm not going to repeat myself. You need to leave." Marcus' voice stayed calm, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. "You're telling a Marine to walk away from his own son's graduation. Think real hard about that." The second guard shifted his stance, as if expecting Marcus to make a scene. "We're not here to argue, sir. Just following procedure. This area is restricted." "Restricted to what? Proud parents?" Marcus shot back, holding up his ticket again. "Because I've got the paperwork and the service record to be standing here." The crowd nearby was starting to notice, people glancing over, whispers rippling like wine through the bleachers. A woman in the next row muttered, "Why are they hassling him? He's in uniform." The first guard stepped forward, close enough for Marcus to smell his coffee breath. "We don't have to explain ourselves to you. You're leaving now." Marcus took in the scene. 2 guards blocking his way, the murmurs growing, the music warming up in the distance. He thought about his son standing in formation somewhere behind those gates, scanning the crowd for a glimpse of his father. And that's when the low, deliberate sound of boots hitting pavement cut through the noise. 6 men in khaki uniforms were approaching in a tight line, calm, precise, and carrying the quiet authority of people who never had to raise their voices to be heard. The security guards didn't see them yet, but they would. The sound grew louder, measured steps in perfect unison. Heads in the crowd began to turn, and a small ripple of silence followed in their wake. The 6 men moved like they were still on a mission, broad-shouldered, sun-cut faces, the quiet swagger of those who had already been tested and found unbreakable. Marcus recognized it instantly. SEALs. They weren't here for ceremony chatter or polite introductions. Each wore the tan and green combination of Navy service dress, rows of ribbons on their chests catching the sunlight. No smiles, no wasted movement. The lead SEAL, a tall man with ice-gray eyes, stopped just a few feet from the security guards. He didn't look at Marcus first. He looked through the guards, as if sizing them up for something more serious than a graduation. "Problem here, Sergeant?" he asked Marcus, his voice low but carrying. Marcus didn't answer right away. He didn't need to, the guards did. The first one straightened up, finally noticing the gold trident pin on the SEAL's chest. No problem, sir," the guard stammered. The SEAL tilted his head slightly, still not breaking eye contact. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're trying to remove a Marine from his own son's graduation." Behind them, the other 5 SEALs fanned out, not threatening, but unmistakably forming a wall between Marcus and anyone who might try to move him. The crowd's murmurs had gone quiet. The air felt heavy, like everyone was waiting for a single command. The SEAL leader let the silence stretch just long enough to make the guards fidget. Then, without raising his voice, he said, "Everybody here, shut up and listen." The command wasn't barked. It didn't need to be. It rolled out low and steady, but it carried the weight of men who had given orders in places where hesitation got people killed. And it worked. Conversations in the bleachers died mid-sentence. Even the brass section warming up in the distance faltered, a trumpet hanging on a long, uneasy note before cutting off entirely. The two guards froze, suddenly hyper-aware of the eyes on them. From the crowd, from Marcus, and most of all, from 6 men whose reputations preceded them. The SEAL leader took a single step forward. "Let me make sure I understand." This Marine, in full dress blues, with a ticket in his hand, was told to leave? Neither guard answered. Their mouths opened, but nothing came out. Marcus stood still, his hands at his sides, every inch of him radiating discipline. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing anger. This was no longer about his pride. It was about every person watching, and the lesson these guards were about to learn. One of the other SEALs, a stocky man with forearms like steel cables, broke the silence. "You boys even know who you're talking to?" The first guard glanced at Marcus again, as if finally realizing the ribbons across his chest weren't for show. Just following procedure." The SEAL leader cut him off, voice calm but dangerous. "Your procedure ends where our people's honor begins." And somewhere behind them, the master of ceremonies' voice crackled over the loudspeaker, announcing that the parade was about to start. The loudspeaker's voice faded into the background, but the tension at the gate stayed razor-sharp. Marcus could see the first formations marching onto the parade ground in the distance, rows of white hats glinting in the sun. Somewhere in there was his son, scanning the stands for him. The SEAL leader shifted his gaze from the guards to Marcus. "Sergeant Hale, you're with us. No one stops you from seeing your son take that field." Marcus gave a small nod. "Appreciate it." The first guard's voice cracked as he tried to recover some authority. "Look, this isn't." The stocky SEAL stepped in, close enough that the guard had to tilt his chin up. "You didn't what? Think a black Marine belonged here? Or just figured no one would call you on it?" The crowd behind them shifted, people whispering to one another, some holding up phones now. The guards looked cornered, not by physical force, but by the sheer certainty radiating from the men in front of them. The leader's voice stayed low, almost conversational. "Here's how this works. You're going to step aside, apologize to this Marine, and let him through. Or I'm going to make a call that'll have your supervisor explaining to the base commander why 2 of his guests just embarrassed the Navy in front of half the graduating class's families." The second guard swallowed hard. His eyes flicked to Marcus, then to the growing number of onlookers, then back to the SEAL leader. And with a reluctant shuffle of boots, they stepped aside. The space they gave him wasn't much, just a narrow gap between 2 sheepish men trying not to meet his eyes. But Marcus walked through it like he was stepping onto a battlefield. Head high, shoulders squared, every stride saying, "I belong here," and always did. The SEALs closed in around him, not in an aggressive way, but with the natural formation of men who'd moved together in tight spaces before. For stayed at his flanks, one behind, one slightly ahead, as if guiding the way. The crowd parted instinctively, the kind of deference you didn't have to earn twice. A woman in the front row reached out, touching Marcus lightly on the sleeve. "We saw everything," she whispered. "You shouldn't have had to fight to be here." Marcus gave her the smallest smile he could manage. "Ma'am, I've been fighting to be here my whole life." As they reached the stands, the SEAL leader turned to face the crowd that had been watching. His voice was calm, but cut through the air like a blade. "If you ever see this happen to someone, anyone, you speak up. This uniform isn't just cloth. It's sacrifice. It's service. It's earned." Every word hung heavy in the warm Virginia air. Even the band stayed quiet, waiting for the moment to pass. Marcus took his seat in the front row, exactly where he'd planned to be all along. And in the distance, his son's unit wheeled into position. Their eyes met, father and son, and in that brief moment, the noise of the morning faded. Marcus was exactly where he was meant to be. You could feel it. The air in the bleachers had changed. What had started as scattered curiosity was now a quiet, focused respect. People leaned forward, eyes on Marcus, as if seeing more than a man in uniform. They'd just watched him stand his ground with dignity, watched others stand beside him without hesitation. The guards lingered awkwardly near the gate, no longer blocking anyone, their radios silent. Every so often one would glance toward Marcus, but the SEAL's presence kept them rooted where they stood. The parade ground came alive. The rhythmic thump of boots echoed across the asphalt as the graduates marched in perfect lines. Sunlight flashed off polished belt buckles, rifles glinted in the morning light, and somewhere in the middle of the third row, there he was. Petty Officer Second Class Jordan Hale. His eyes scanned the stands with sharp precision, but when he spotted Marcus, something in his expression shifted, a quick tightening around the jaw, a barely there lift of the chin. Pride, recognition, relief. Marcus gave the faintest nod in return, the kind of subtle exchange military men understood without words. The SEAL leader stepped closer to Marcus, speaking low enough for only him to hear. Your boy marches like he's ready for anything. Marcus' gaze never left his son. He had to be. Somewhere behind them, a man in civilian clothes muttered just loud enough. Guess those guards learned who not to mess with. And for the first time all morning, Marcus let himself smile. Not out of spite, out of victory. The commanding officer's voice boomed over the loudspeaker, calling the assembled graduates to attention. Hundreds of boots struck the pavement in unison, the sound rolling through the parade ground like a single heartbeat. Marcus sat tall, his white-gloved hands resting on his knees, but his eyes stayed locked on Jordan. Every step his son took was measured, deliberate, a living reflection of the discipline Marcus had lived by and passed down. One of the SEALs beside him leaned in slightly. Which branch you hoping he transfers to after this? Marcus didn't look away from the field. Not my call. My job was to get him ready for wherever he's headed. On the far side of the stands, the two security guards were no longer watching the ceremony. They stood stiffly by the gate, avoiding eye contact with the crowd, the weight of what had just happened still hanging heavy on their shoulders. The SEAL leader glanced over at them once, slow and deliberate, before returning his gaze to the field. It wasn't a threat, just a reminder. As the first names began to echo from the loudspeaker, Marcus felt the noise of the crowd swell again, but it was different now. Less chatter, more reverence. Even people who didn't know what had happened at the gate seemed to understand they were watching more than just a graduation. When Jordan's name was called, Marcus stood, not because it was expected, but because it was earned. And when their eyes met again across the parade ground, both men knew. This day hadn't been about who could keep him out. It was about who had made sure he got in. Jordan stepped forward to receive his certificate, the gold of his insignia catching a slice of sunlight. His posture was flawless, chin high, shoulders square, but Marcus could see the flicker of something more in his son's eyes. As the commanding officer handed him the scroll, Jordan turned sharply toward the stands. And then, breaking from protocol for just a heartbeat, he raised his hand in a crisp, deliberate salute, not to the reviewing stand, but to his father. The gesture was small, but it hit Marcus harder than any medal ever had. He rose to his feet, returning the salute with the same precision he'd given on countless battlefields. 2 Marines, 2 generations, one unbroken line of service and sacrifice. The crowd caught on, a murmur running through the stands. They didn't know the full story, but they understood enough that this was more than just a proud moment between father and son. Beside Marcus, the SEAL leader gave a slow nod. That's respect you can't fake. No, Marcus said quietly, eyes still locked on his boy. And you can't take it away either. Jordan fell back into formation, his salute complete, but the connection between them stayed, steady, unshaken, unspoken. Somewhere behind, the guards shifted uncomfortably, and Marcus didn't even glance their way. They were no longer part of his day. The ceremony rolled on, but Marcus could feel it, the quiet attention of strangers. People who'd watched him walk through that gate with 6 SEALs at his side now saw him as more than just another uniform in the crowd. They'd witnessed the disrespect, the defense, and the dignity that followed. In the row behind him, an older man in a worn Navy cap leaned forward. "Son," he murmured, "I've seen a lot of graduations. Never seen one start like that. You did right." Marcus gave a slight nod. Just did what needed doing. But he knew the truth. Plenty of people saw moments like that and chose silence. It was the SEAL's choice to step in that had shifted the day, not just for him, but for everyone watching. Down by the gate, one of the guards was speaking into his radio, voice low. The other kept glancing toward the stands, as if the SEALs might still be looking at him. They weren't. Their attention was on the field, the kind of focus that made everything else fade. The loudspeaker called another name, and a young sailor jogged forward to collect his certificate. Applause rose and fell like waves, but it all felt different now, more intentional, more aware. Marcus sat still, eyes forward, the pride in his chest burning hotter than the midday sun. He didn't know it yet, but the real conversation about what happened at that gate hadn't even started. It would, after the last name was called. When the final name was called, the graduates tossed their covers into the air, a white flurry against the blazing blue sky. Families surged toward the field, laughter and cheers spilling across the parade ground. Marcus waited. Years in the Corps had taught him the power of letting the rush pass before you move. The SEALs stayed with him, an unspoken escort, until the crowd thinned enough for him to step down onto the asphalt. Jordan spotted him first. He broke from his cluster of classmates and strode across the field, his grin breaking the rigid discipline of the morning. "Dad." They clasped hands in a grip that was part handshake, part embrace, both men's shoulders locking for a moment before releasing. "You made it," Jordan said, though the flicker in his eyes told Marcus he'd guessed there'd been trouble. "I told you I'd be here," Marcus replied, voice steady. "And I had some help." Jordan glanced past his father, taking in the SEALs still standing nearby. The leader gave him a nod of acknowledgement, the kind only warriors traded. But before they could say more, the two security guards approached, their expressions caught somewhere between shame and discomfort. One cleared his throat. "Sir, about earlier." Marcus didn't let him finish. "Enjoy the rest of your day, gentlemen." His tone was calm, not dismissive, just final, because this moment wasn't theirs anymore. It was his and his son's. The SEAL leader stepped forward, his shadow cutting across the guard's path. "You too remember something," he said quietly, his tone level but sharp enough to cut through the noise of the dispersing crowd. "The people you dismiss are often the ones you should be standing beside." The guards nodded, eyes fixed anywhere but on Marcus. No excuses this time, no muttered justifications, just the awkward shuffle of men who'd been given a truth they couldn't talk their way around. Marcus didn't linger. He turned back to Jordan, clapping a hand on his son's shoulder. "Let's get that photo your mother's been waiting for." They walked toward the stands together, the SEALs peeling off one by one, each giving Marcus a brief nod before disappearing into the crowd. No fanfare, no thanks expected, just a job done right. As they reached the edge of the field, Jordan asked, "So what really happened before I saw you?" Marcus smiled faintly, his gaze still on the path ahead. "Just a reminder," he said, "that respect isn't given because of rank or uniform. It's given because you demand it, without ever raising your voice." Somewhere behind them, the brass band struck up one last march as families headed for the exits. The day's heat was beginning to fade, but the lesson, burned into everyone who'd seen it, would stay. And the two guards at the gate, they'd never forget who walked past them that morning, and who made sure he did. Thank you for watching. Subscribe me and hit the notification bell to not miss new stories. Bye.